Well, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'd like to tell you about a new yoke that's become available. It's very similar to the Yoko Plus from SmartFly. Very similar features and performance, but it's available at about 1/3 the price. Now, the SmartFly Yoke is made in India by a company called Ray Dynamics. And I would like to tell you a little bit about it. I'll do a quick unboxing and give you my evaluation as a long-term pilot about how I like the way it handles and feels. I'll also tell you how one of its weakest points turned out to be one of its strongest points due to the commitment of its developers. Also, I have no financial connection to Ray Dynamics. They gave me this yoke free to evaluate with no limitations on my review. When Ramesh at Ray Dynamics contacted me, I knew nothing about this yoke. I had never heard of it, but I agreed to take a look and they shipped me one. Now, I always found it a little strange watching someone unpack a box, so I'll make this quick. It was well packed. Made the trip from India with no problem. Everything was secure and safe. All the accessories packed in a box, wrapped in plastic, everything ready to go. Besides the yoke itself, there were some accessories, some clamps for attaching it to a desk. More on that later. A cable for attaching USB to your computer, and also a spare bungee for replacement inside. Uses two, but one spare. And then there was some documentation, including a warranty card and a booklet with some basic information on setup and quick start guide. First glance, you can't believe how substantial this yoke is. It's very solidly built with a very large diameter shaft, all metal handle with a nice glossy finish. Switches very much equivalent to those found on the Yoko by SmartFly. I'll make comparisons to the Yoko frequently because I own a Yoko and a Yoko Plus, and I love them. But this case is all metal, just like the Yoko. It's slightly narrower, slightly longer, and about the same height. The shaft is definitely bigger, and the yoke handle is a beefy thing. It feels like a much bigger airplane in your hand instead of this small, thin Cessna style on the Yoko. Besides the C clamps for mounting to your desk, there are also 4 threaded holes in the case for mounting this permanently to a flight sim desk. That's the way I anticipate most people using it. Here's a quick look at the yoke dimensions, which you can freeze frame and look at if you like. Here are the specs too, if you'd like to stop and look at those. I know the Yoko is always touted for having such a long pitch travel. This is actually a slightly larger with 155 millimeters compared to Yoko's 144. Now, once in the simulator, you find that not only is the handle beefy, but the spring bungees are quite a bit stronger than any yoke I've ever used before, and I really like that feel. The problem arose was once you're in the air, uh, I was having trouble trimming the aircraft. I would trim it and release the stick, and it would take off. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. I did an entire video, which I'll link above, on trimming airplanes and simulators. In airplanes, we hold the stick where we want the pitch stable, and then we trim till the forces are released, and we can let go of the stick, and it stays there. In the simulator, we trim and ease off the pressure on the stick slowly until we can return the stick to the neutral position, and it'll stay there, and the pitch won't increase or decrease. Simple enough. So I decided to look at Microsoft Flight Simulator's controls to see what exactly was going on. Here's what I found. First, let's look at the roll axis. I'm going to put the mouse here right at the point where it settles down. And you can see I'm going either large inputs or small inputs. It's returning pretty much exactly to the same point. Very close. Now let's try the elevator axis. I'll put the mouse pointer right at the point there where it had stopped. And you can see, not quite the same spot. But this with a large input, it's tends to not come back to the same spot. You can see sometimes it's to the right, sometimes it's to the left. Not perfect. And if I do a really small input where it doesn't have much speed, you can see it's for stopping way short of returning to that neutral point. So when you trim the aircraft, you take the pressure off the stick, but it's really not going back to the center point, and you've trimmed the aircraft there. And as soon as you move it a little, it returns to the neutral point, and it's not trimmed. So you're constantly having to retrim the airplane. I found this very annoying. I felt kind of bad because after my initial short flight the first day, I sent an email to them in India saying how great I love this yoke. It feels so solid and heavy on the controls. Feels like a real airplane. I love it. And then I noticed this problem when I started trying to fly in earnest and try to hold altitude and do some maneuvers and so on. And I said, this is not something that I could recommend. So I honestly told them that, and they said, well, let us try to fix this. And do you have any ideas? And we talked a little bit, and they came up with a solution. And it involved a modification to the design. And recently they've sent me the modified design, and I'm going to tell you about that. And it turns out they had some high quality nylon bearings at the shaft and also the rails that carry the carriage inside. And they were replaced with linear bearings. You can see from this picture that the shaft extends out of the case. Actually, I thought it was pretty cool. It reminded me of the yoke shaft on the Beech Premier 1. It looks kind of similar with the bearing there. I can also tell you that it totally eliminated the problem and difficulty in trimming the aircraft. I tried my Yoko Plus just to give it a try and see how well it did. And with very small inputs, the friction of the shaft still caused it to hang up just a little bit short of returning back to where it should be. Not bad, but and certainly acceptable. And I've never noticed this on the Yoko, but it still has the problem to a small degree. So with that in mind, let's see how the SmartFly Yoke did in testing after the modification, adding the ball bearing linear bearings throughout. So now watch the pitch with very small inputs. It normally would have hung up, but it's returning exactly to the same point. Eliminating this friction that impedes movement very close to the neutral point makes it very easy to fly extra precise in pitch. Now let's go take a short flight with the yoke and I'll tell you more about it. Well, I gotta first say this is a pretty stiff yoke. It feels very realistic. You can see the force required is actually moving the pedestal that I have my yoke mounted on a little bit. Now, I have to tell you, I'm not in love with these clamps. They actually are quite secure. I just don't like the way they look. When they're installed, they can clamp around about 1.5 inches desk or about 38 millimeters. The problem is the crank handle there below, when they're fully extended, sticks pretty far down. Fortunately, there are 4 threaded mounting holes underneath for mounting permanently to a desk. The all-metal construction and the 25 millimeter stainless steel shaft for the yoke seem very durable. As we start the takeoff roll, I have to say this yoke feels very appropriate for an aircraft like this, slightly larger and heftier than some of the smaller yokes. At rotation, I have to say, I like the feel. It's very accurate, precise pitch, and the 12-bit Hall effect sensors transfer that accuracy right into the simulator. That's the same resolution as the Yoko Plus, which also has Hall effect sensors. A beautiful day departing Phoenix. There's Camelback Mountain off in the distance. Every time I fly this simulator, I just have to appreciate the awesome work they've done on the scenery. It's just unbelievable. You know, immediately after the COVID lockdowns, when Microsoft 2020 was released, it was very hard to find yokes, so it's good to see some new entries in there. There's been quite a few, but none are that remarkable. Actually, I like this yoke a lot. It feels very good. The pitch is very responsive, and I like the heavy feel on the controls. I grew up near Cincinnati, Ohio, and did all my initial civilian training in that area, and and then pilot training at Oklahoma. But then when I went to the F4, I did my training at George Air Force Base out in Southern California and got flying some in the desert. And I just love flying in the desert. I love the looks of the terrain here. It's usually good, clear weather. Uh, just a great place to fly. So I really appreciate being able to experience this in the simulator. It brings back lots of memories. As I said earlier, I liked an awful lot about this yoke from the very beginning, especially the $399 price. The fact that it was made out of all metal and it felt good, looked good, but it didn't quite perform well. And that's when I contacted the guys at Ray Dynamics. Now let's try a steep turn here and see how it feels with a little force on the yoke, how precise it is. Going to roll into a nice 45 to 50 degree turn here. I do like the amount of pressure that's required to maintain. Feels very realistic. Some of the smaller yokes, the honeycomb, for example, it just has not enough force to make it feel realistic. Don't get me wrong, I love the honeycomb and I think it's a great yoke. But for a permanent flight simulator where you're going to build it in, I think this might be a better choice. Certainly the Yoko is a good choice too. And I've had very good support and very good luck using that, both the original Yoko and the Yoko Plus. But for the price, this might be a very good option for a lot of people. I did tell the guys at Ray Dynamics that although I love the heavy feel, you know, I flew airliners and maybe not everyone would like that. So they said that they would try to work out something, and they came up with a plan to make some changes to the bungees. You can remove the bungees by removing 4 screws in the case, and in the side you can see the bungees can be removed just by pulling a cap out of a mount, and once you have removed the stress from the bungee, there's just 2 Allen screws that you need a hex wrench, which they include, that can be used to remove that and change the bungee. And they're going to offer, now what I flew with was with 2 10mm bungees. They're going to offer some 8mm bungees. In fact, the shipping version is going to have an 8 on the top and a 10 on the bottom. But I'll show you that there's several configurations. This is going to allow you to have a variable force depending on what you like. Chart shows the pull forces on the yoke at 25, 50, and 75 millimeters of pull. And you can see with the 10 and 10, there's almost 30 pounds at full deflection. If you look at the 8 and 10, it's down to 25. If you use the 8 and 8, it's 19.4 pounds and only 16 pounds at full. And you can see how those vary. You can stop frame and look at this. You can see it from 100% with the way it's going to ship with the 8 and the 10mm bungees installed. You can increase that to 118% the way I flew it with the 2 10mm bungees, 77% of the force with 2 8mm bungees, and you can even go down to 64% if you remove the top bungee and just use the lower bungee. This gives you a lot of flexibility to dial it in just the way you want it. And also, it's not that much trouble to do it. Yoko is going to ship with additional bungees and the tools needed to support all those configurations. Really don't know of any yoke with this much flexibility in this regard. On the downside, there's not a lot of bells and whistles on this thing. It's kind of like the Yoko. It has almost the same buttons. They're slightly different layout, but the same functionality as the Yoko. But you don't have any the fancy gear switches and lights and all that stuff that makes the Honeycomb a great first yoke for a lot of people. This is more for someone who's going to add a lot of that other stuff on in their own home simulator and is willing to do that extra work and just wants a good quality yoke to use in their setup. I have to say that Ray Dynamics, Ramesh, and the other people there have done a great job at fixing the issue they had, and I give them kudos for being willing to spend a little money and try to make it right before they release this yoke. Definitely involves a little more money to put the linear bearings in there, and they haven't raised the price. The way they handled this would make me a little more prone to buy this yoke because in this case they showed a desire to do things right. Of course, warranties are only as good as a company that stands behind them, and I know they've got a lot of local business in India, but they don't have a lot of track record with us. I have to say that to get a yoke that is functionally similar to the Yoko Plus for 1/3 the price is certainly a compelling proposition, and for many people may be worth any risk that's involved. Now let's try a clean stall just to see how the handling is at low speed in the stall clean configuration. We'll see what happens. We'll just continue to increase the pitch, try to hold altitude as we approach the stall and then recover. Really like the pitch accuracy, very easy to fly. Now we'll continue on over to the Goodyear Airport where we'll land. Have a kind of an interest in Goodyear because my brother-in-law has a winter home out in the Goodyear area, and also the Cincinnati Reds, the baseball team here in Cincinnati where I live near, has their spring training there. So before we land, let me share my pros and cons for the SmartFly from Ray Dynamics. First of all, this yoke is a great value, obviously offering a lot of features for a very reasonable price. Secondly, the sturdy metal construction appears to me to be fairly durable. It feels very solid, and what I've seen looking inside the case seems like it should provide a good service for a long period of time. Next, the yoke offers precise performance due to the 12-bit Hall effect sensors and the recently added linear bearings in the pitch axis. With yoke travel slightly longer than the Yoko, it adds to realism and muscle memory when using the yoke for training. And finally, although it's subjective, I like the feel of this yoke, and I'd be happy to use it in my home simulator. Now let's look at some of the cons. First, much like the Yoko, it's a no-frills, no-fluff basic control yoke, offering precision inputs, both pitch and roll, and only a minimum number of switches just located on the yoke handle itself, including a hat switch, pitch and roll, trim switches, and 2 switches for press to talk and autopilot disconnect. And as I've said before, I don't think the desk clamping system using the C-clamps is very elegant solution. I wouldn't use it in my setup anyway, but for some people that may be a negative. And finally, Ray Dynamics is an unknown entity to me and probably many in Europe and the US. So the warranty and the durability of the product are still unproven. Now, this is a slight risk, and I would certainly take it for the price, but for many people, that is a personal decision they're going to have to make. So what's the bottom line on the SmartFly yoke from Ray Dynamics? It's interesting that the yoke that I couldn't recommend at first, that with a little work, receives my wholehearted thumbs up recommendation. I wouldn't hesitate to buy the Ray Dynamics yoke. at the current price. Well, that's it. I'll put a slide at the end of the video with contact information on how you can find out more about the SmartFly from Ray Dynamics. As usual, I ask that if you're enjoying my videos, if you think they have value, please subscribe, like, share with your friends. I love to have your comments. Thanks for watching. Hope I'll see you again on my next video. Have a great day.